Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires. Yet for the next couple of months, we will be discussing the greatest disaster in the history of the Imperium of Man. That's right, folks. The Horus Heresy.
Wow, we're going to try to plug in the whole Horus Heresy in just 8 weeks?
Well, yeah. Now mind you, some of this stuff we've already covered, and we will definitely tell you which episodes they are on. Not only that, but all the bonus boxes and shorts I will be doing over the next 2 months will also revolve around the heresy. We want to cover as much of this tumultuous time as possible.
Well, I hope that is enough time. This is a pretty important subject, Zeckthar.
Indeed, brother. But before we get started, if you enjoy our voxes on the histories of the Milky Way system, feel free to subscribe, comment, follow, and like. And if you really like our stuff, please join our mission squad on our YouTube channel, Tales of Ashraka.
With your support, we can continue to build and grow our own boxes, as well as some cool extra stuff for you guys that join. Now, if you are listening on Spotify, don't worry, you can help as well. If you click the support podcast button on any of the descriptions on Spotify, you can donate to our success too. Well, I think that about covers our intro, but tell me, Zeckthar, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today, we'll be starting with the guy who started the Imperium of Man, the Big E, the head honcho, the savior of humanity, the emperor of mankind.
Really? We're going to do a whole box on this Cretan?
Well, we probably should. He is the reason this whole thing kicked off, right?
Fair enough. Well, why don't you start with how he came to be?
Well, little is known about the majority of the Emperor's life, of who he was and what he did before he emerged as the great Emperor of mankind. Only the Emperor himself remembers. A few pieces of information have come to light from various different sources and present some small parts of coherent whole. However, the reliability is often disputed, especially as the Emperor's tale changes somewhat with each retelling. There is a source, however, from an old book written by Inquisitor Thrax called The Realm of Chaos, which is split into 2 volumes, known as The Slaves of Darkness and The Lost and the Damned. In these books, there are details of where the Emperor actually came from.
I've heard of these books, but aren't they banned by the Imperium as being works of fiction and heresy?
Yes, well, that has to do with the author more than the information. Apparently, Inquisitor Thrax was sent to investigate the Astartes chapter known as the Grey Slayers. They become corrupted by chaos, as a result of which Inquisitor Thrax purged the chapter of mutants and demons, and the chapter master even took his own life. The chapter was reformed, but the purge was apparently not quite thorough enough, as Inquisitor Thrax himself was soon afterwards corrupted and turned into some sort of demonic beast.
Ah, I see. So because he was corrupted by chaos, all of his written works were taken as heresy by humanity.
Yes, indeed. And while the historians of the Imperium might have a problem with it, we surely don't.
Quite so. But you did vet it, correct?
Of course. Now, it says the Emperor's birth, while a natural process, was actually the result of a scheme created by the wisest and most powerful of living humans at that time, the Conclave of Shamans. These men, termed shamans by their society, were powerful psychers with great experience of the warp, finding their souls and those of humanity. Endangered by the growing perils of the warp gods, these psychers decided to pool their power into one human, a being they called the New Man. Already having gained the power to reincarnate themselves, so upon death, the shaman's souls would transfer to the warp, accumulating power enough to reincarnate as human. The shamans entered a suicidal pact. Thousands of them poisoned themselves and sped their souls to the warp at the same time, presumably pooling their soul energy and using their reincarnation ability. They brought about the birth of their new man, the Emperor, 1 year later. The same source states that the Emperor was born to mortal parents on Terra in the 8th millennium BC in a primitive Proto-Hittite village along the banks of the Sakkari River in Anatolia, manifesting his powers as a youth. While as a young adolescent, the emperor's father was murdered by his uncle. While preparing his father's body for a primitive funeral rite, he received a vision of this murder. Later, the boy who would become the emperor calmly approached his uncle and stopped his heart with his psychic abilities, displaying neither sorrow nor malice. According to the emperor himself, this was the moment he realized that humanity needed law and order and the guidance of a ruler. Shortly after, he left his village for the first city of humanity, likely ancient Sumeria. Sometime later, the perpetual Urda met with the emperor. Already a warlord attempted to accelerate human evolution and guide the race into a superior species. Urda became one of the emperor's followers as he attempted to seek out and recruit every perpetual on Earth to his cause. During this time, the emperor was known as Noeth. At some point before recorded history, the emperor became a king and organized his own armies with a perpetual that would become known as Olanius Person as his war master. Seeking to protect and guide humanity, the two friends besieged a tower in East Phoenicia, built by the cult that would later become known as the Cognitia. After the forces succeeded in capturing the tower, they discovered it covered in inertia and bleeding in the corruption power of the warp. Olanius demanded the tower destroyed, while the emperor wished to preserve the knowledge it held within it in order to better protect against chaos in the future. Disillusioned with the emperor, Olanius stabbed the king with a dagger and then uttered a line of inertia to destroy the tower and escaped. The immortal being.
Question: is this the same person who is mentioned in our Grammaticus?
Yes, this is exactly the same guy, by the way. Yes. I was wondering if you're going to catch that. Yes, this is Olanius Person. He's the guy that John found who had just been kind of living on, I think, he lived on Calth, and then that whole thing took place, and then he ended up joining John Grammaticus, and then he ended up back on Terra, and then there's rumors that he's the one lone Imperial Guardsman that stood up against Horus before the Emperor showed up. So just give a little brief background on our boy Person, but that's what ended up happening to him. But moving on with the Emperor. The immortal being who would become known as the Emperor proceeded to haunt the history of humanity as a ghost, watching, waiting, and occasionally influencing. Living secretly amongst mankind, he developed his abilities until his psychic might allowed him to gain knowledge of not only his own world, but of the dangers beyond it. Aware then of the vast predations awaiting humanity, the being that would become known as the Emperor resolved to guide and protect humanity. The Emperor took many forms during this time. Some were brutal conquerors. Some became mate to inherit the earth. One identity of the Emperor during this time was Alexander the Great. In an account given by Horus, it is said that he wept before the river Hippasus when he thought there were no more worlds to conquer. Not long after, he discovered what would be named the Golden Throne. During the Dark Age of technology, Olivia Sireka traveled with the Emperor to the planet Molech, where there was a gateway into the realm of chaos. The Emperor entered the gateway and there made a bargain with the dark gods and emerged wielding a measure of their power, including the ability to create the Primarchs. However, for some reason, the Emperor did not keep his end of the bargain to spread chaos to humanity, and he became the anathema of ruinous powers. The Emperor was able to clone the energies he was imbued with, giving them to his Primarchs after combining his own genetic materials with that of Urda's. At some point in Earth's history, the Emperor discovered an ancient device beneath the ruins of Asia's deserts and became determined to completely cut off humanity from the malignant influence of the warp. The first step of this grand project was to substitute warp travel with the Webway. And the final phase would see the Emperor shepherding humanity's evolution into the truly psychic race independent of chaos, ascending to a level not even the Eldar were able to. This grand ambition was to guide all of the Emperor's undertakings and would be the culmination of his plannings. Now, pardon me, brother, but you mind telling the fine folks at home what and where the Webway came from?
Sure, the Webway, also known as the Labyrinth Dimension, is an extra-dimensional space partitioned off from the Immaterium millions of Terran years ago by an extremely advanced Xenos race known as the Old Ones. Mind you, for those of you who recognize that name, it's because we talked about it way back when we first started our boxes.
With the Necrons.
And yes.
So if you want to know more about the Old Ones, you can check them out there. You can also check them out anyways when we talk about the orcs, because they're important there too. But anyway, sorry. Carry on, Yuksen.
After the Old Ones were defeated by the Catan and the Necrons, the Eldari continued to make use of the webways as transportation until the birth of Slanesh. Today, it is utilized by the Eldari Asuriani of the craft worlds and their Drukhari counterparts for faster-than-light travel. It serves as the home of the vast dark city of Kamarach and the hidden craft world controlled by the Harlequins known as the Black Library. The Webway Project was a revolutionary concept seeking to replace the primary means of interstellar transportation for humanity. In short, the project sought to replace warp travel with access to the Webway. The Webway was a far more efficient means of travel and, most importantly, bypassed the depredations of chaos within the warp. The ultimate objective of the Webway Project was for the Emperor to completely sever humanity from the warp in its entirety, depriving chaos of its power. This would come as the Emperor guided the species in its evolution into a fully psychic race, assuring its ascendancy on the galactic stage. Now, where the Emperor got it into his head how to utilize this technology is uncertain. In a psychic musing with custodian Diocletian Koros, the Emperor explained that he either improved on technology from the dark age of technology or possibly came up with an idea on his own, but he refused to give a definite answer. Using a psyker of great power, likely originally intended to be Magnus the Red, a portal into the Webway would be created from the Golden Throne. The Emperor was able to create such a portal deep within the Imperial Palace on Terra. It is here that he began his work to expand human access in the Webway. The Emperor created a new caste of Mechanicum tech priests known as the Unifiers to construct new Webway tunnels for human use. However, unlike the original Webway tunnels, these were not made of psychically resistant material. Instead, the psychic will of the Emperor via the Golden Throne protected the tunnels from demonic intrusion. After the Ulanor Crusade, the Emperor named Horus as War Master and returned to Terra in order to work on the Webway Project. The project was mired in the greatest secrecy. Not even the Primarchs knew why the Emperor returned to Terra. The Emperor's secrecy may have been motivated in part over fears of how the Navis Nobilite would respond if they felt their monopoly on interstellar travel was being threatened. Indeed, the Paternova of the Navigators dispatched an agent to destroy a prototype that would link with the Golden Throne, the Dark Glass.
Pardon me, brother, but what the devil is the Dark Glass?
The Dark Glass is an ancient device dating back to the Dark Age of technology, consisting of a long crystalline station over the Catalyst Warp Rift. The Dark Glass was surrounded by a massive, planet-sized hollow shell of mirror-like material. The origins of the device are, of course, unknown, but it is thought to have been used to test the technology that would later result in the Golden Throne. Like the throne, Dark Glass was capable of accessing the Webway and was commanded by a central throne that required a psyker of enormous power to operate. During the Great Crusade, the Dark Glass was discovered by the Emperor, who sought to reactivate the device in order to advance his own Webway Access project. The research team was led by the navigator Peter Helion Ashelu, who diligently worked to unlock its mysteries despite the threat Dark Glass and the Golden Throne presented to the Navis Nobilite, whose control of the warp travel would be rendered obsolete by its completion. However, the Dark Glass was kept a secret from the greater Imperium for reasons including fears of how the navigator houses would react. The station's warp rift eventually drove the crew mad. As the dark glass erupted in bloodshed, Peter was killed by the command throne when he attempted to open a portal into the Webway. Later, during the Horus Heresy, the White Scars were able to eventually discover the now abandoned Dark Glass's location. They were pursued by Death Guard and Emperor's Children fleet, led by Mortarion himself. In the ensuing battle, an agent of the Navis Nobilite, who had accompanied the Scars, Vale, managed to begin the station's destruction with vortex charges. As the station collapsed around him and with the enemy closing in, White Scar's Stormseer, Targutai Yasuge, sacrificed himself on the Dark Glass's throne to open a portal to Terra that allowed the White Scars to escape. Dark Glass exploded shortly after.
That's actually really interesting. What?
I know, right? Speaking of White Scars, did you know that Jagatai Khan was there during part of the testing of the Golden Throne?
That's pretty cool, but I don't think we've got...
Yes! A thousand son by the name of Arvida, who was stuffed into a stasis sarcophagus because he was going through a flesh change. He was then taken to the deepest subterranean levels of the Imperial Dungeon, located far below the Imperial Palace. There, Malcador attempted to bind a fragment of Magnus the Red's psyche, one of the many shards of the Crimson King's psychic soul, which remained on Terra. It was with this shard of Magnus's soul which Malcador hoped to utilize while Arvida's body was in the last stages of the flesh change. The Sigillite hoped to resurrect a form of Magnus so that he could take his place upon the Golden Throne and fulfill the destiny the Emperor had originally intended for his psychically potent son, to connect the myriad worlds of the Imperium with the human version of the Eldari Webway. Worried at what was being done to Arvida, Jagatai Khan rushed to his aid and ordered the Sigillite to stop what he was doing. It was already too late. As the shard of Magnus was too powerful to contain, Arvida's severely mutated body began to be consumed by psychic fire. Malcador intended to euthanize the sorcerer, but Khan insisted that Arvida was his ward and must be given a chance to succeed or fail on his own, without any outside interference. The Primarch then proceeded to destroy the arcane machinery in the chamber, freeing the amalgam of Magnus / Arvida from the suppression fields and psychic wards. The psychic energy that consumed Arvida's body soon coalesced and solidified into solid matter, taking the form of an Astartes, but without any sign of the flesh change. One of the being's eyes was swollen with scar tissue, much like the Crimson King's own missing eye. This entity was not the Shadow Primarch trapped in a host body like Malcador had intended, nor was he entirely the legionary formerly known as Ravuel Arvida, for he had become much more. When referring to himself, he asked to be called...
Yuksen! Yuksen?
Yes?
Well, this is all very interesting. We are getting away from the subject at hand. You know, the thing you're supposed to be talking about. The Golden Throne.
Right. Well, upon first entering the Webway, the previous masters of the Webway, the Eldari, began sealing portals to their own craft worlds to prevent possible Imperial invasion. Ultimately, the Emperor's grand vision of human dominion over the Webway was doomed by Magnus the Red, attempting to warn the treachery of Horus and Erebus on Davin. Magnus used a forbidden psychic ritual to contact the Emperor personally deep within the Imperial Palace. The ritual created a massive psychic backlash, forming a chain reaction on the Emperor's carefully constructed wards across the Imperial Palace. The catastrophic event created multiple warp rifts known as Magnus's Folly within the Webway itself, through which countless demons poured. The Emperor was forced to try and contain the breach by permanently residing on the Golden Throne for much of the subsequent Horus Heresy, while the Custodian Guard and Sisters of Silence battled hordes of demons to prevent them from entering the Imperial Palace and overrunning Terra itself. In the end, the Emperor was forced to seal the Webway portal within the Imperial Palace to prevent Terra from destruction, effectively dooming the Webway Project. Well, before we go, I figured, Zeckthar, that we give our own personal ideas on what the Emperor is and his personality.
It sounds great, Yuksen. But other than that, I actually do have a couple questions for you.
Sure, but mind if I start?
Why not at all?
The Emperor is a dick. Now,
What?
what do you think of him?
Wait, is that it? Is that all we got? I think there's a little bit more to the Emperor. I mean, what do you think of him? Other than what you just eloquently described.
Okay, he is egotistical.
Mm-hmm.
He's power hungry.
Mm.
No, not he is. He's trying to basically put the human race at the top of the food chain, and him being at the top of it means he'll be at the top of the food chain. He's power hungry.
Fair enough. Yeah. But isn't any leader?
No, not any leader.
Really? Give me an example of one, anyways, that is not empirical and not on conquest, anyways, that wants to expand and wants to be at the top of the food chain. Give me one.
I didn't say didn't want to expand. I'm talking about wanting to be the most powerful being, sort of thing.
Oh, so you've bought into the whole concept that he wanted to be a god.
Well, he doesn't want to be called a god, but he's kind of aiming for it.
Okay, this is the thing that I've always found that it's very interesting about the Emperor, is that he wanted to wield godlike powers, but he never actually wanted to be declared as a god.
Right.
Which to me, anyways, is fairly interesting. He wanted to be the savior of humanity, but he didn't want to be put up so high as a pedestal, anyways, that people would worship him. Which to me is kind of weird. I mean, he was very...
He wants the ultimate amount of power, but he doesn't want people to treat him like he has ultimate power. That's the ridiculousness of it.
It's weird. I mean, he went through a lot of things anyways that he literally punished people for calling him a god. I mean, in my thing anyways on the Imperial cult, he literally punishes the word bearers and Lorgar.
Yeah, using godlike powers.
Yeah, well, the way he probably looked at it, as using his giant psychic powers. He did it the wrong way around. But
from fanatical religious people.
I mean, this is the guy, anyways, that started the whole concept of the imperial truth. I mean, it was the concept of we don't worship anything, it's science. Science is the way that we lead humanity forward. So I agree with you, anyways, on the concept that he wanted to be a savior of humanity. And I do think, anyways, he had a very big problem with anybody else, anyways, trying to do that. Meaning he was egotistical. He wanted to be, anyways, the guy that's in charge. But at the same time, I don't think that he wanted to be worshipped.
I never said that.
Well, you leaned into it pretty hard, Yuksen. Well, I mean, okay. At this point in history, and we're not talking about anyways the 41st millennium. We're talking about now, anyways, and with the Unification Wars, and he's going to be starting anyways, and we'll talk about this next week anyways, the Great Crusade. Do you think the Emperor has lost his humanity at this point?
Yes.
Why?
Because he doesn't really have any. He doesn't have any feelings towards people as individuals.
Okay.
At all. For example, the fact that he killed his uncle without feeling anything whatsoever.
Which begs the question: did he really? Did he lose his humanity at this point, or was it just when,
probably
back in the day?
Well, it depends. Did he even technically have any humanity to begin with?
Well, I mean, he was born and
Or he
raised
was
as a human.
technically
So
created
at some
via
point, he had some sort of
reincarnation of 1,000 different people.
well, yeah, you do lay a good point, but I'm saying, anyways, he was born and raised by a mother and father. So at some point, anyways, he had the same thing that everybody else in humanity has had, you know, being raised by people, getting that understanding. So, and
Well, not everybody, but
what do you mean?
not everybody has had that happen. But
What?
been raised by other people.
No. No. Every person in humanity has been raised by other people. Okay. There are the slight few, anyways, that have been raised by wolves. But they are slight and they are few. Just about every person on the planet, anyways, has been raised by other people. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, anyways, a mother and father, but they've been raised by people, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So he got the doctrination, anyways, of being a human at that point. The thing that concerns me, anyways, is what you just exactly talked about. Anyway,
He didn't have any feelings towards killing, or actually the fact that his father was killed.
Yeah, that to me, anyways, is a psychopath. I mean, there's no thought process of retribution or this is nothing. It was just this concept is like, well, you killed him, so therefore logically we must kill you. Which, by the way, isn't really necessarily logical. I mean, it doesn't get into it too terribly much, but what happens anyways, like for instance, if the uncle anyways had killed his brother because of some weird circumstance.
He was about to press the wrong button.
Yeah, he's like, no, you're going to kill 10,000 people, and thumped him over the head anyway.
The button.
You know, kind of thing. We don't know. But it just seems anyways that immediately after that, anyways, you have this or a sociopath just immediately just goes, I can control the world. You know, he reminds me actually of, ironically, in Terran 42, the cartoon. You remember Pinky and the Brain?
Yeah.
He sounds like Brain. Quite a bit, actually. What are we going to do tonight, Brain? The same thing we do every night. Try to take over the world. Yep.
Except he has more feelings.
Brain does?
The Emperor.
Yeah, fair enough.
But he actually cares about Pinky.
He does.
In comparison to the Emperor going, you know what? I'm thinking I'm going to take one of my sons and just throw him in this chair. Have him sit there for the rest of his existence. I go hang out.
You know, the funny thing is I was going to give the argument, and it's like, well, he did really care about Malkador the Sigillite, except for the problem was that they shoved him into the Golden Throne at the very end. So it's kind of like, I don't know. The Emperor, to me, is a conundrum, especially looking back on it. I mean, okay, I have to ask real quick anyways, do you think he has any positive qualities?
He did create the Space Marines, which helped protect humanity.
Right. And he did unify humanity.
Yeah. Other than that, not really. Because he's sort of a genocide.
He was also trying to get away from chaos for humanity.
After making a deal with them, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something which apparently he didn't pass on to Magnus, who does the same thing. Huh.
Okay, well, with Magnus, that's a different story. Magnus, anyways, he tried to help the Emperor anyways, and the Emperor... Okay, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
He actually made a deal with Zinch, but we'll talk about that when we talk about Magnus.
Yeah, and that is, by the way, getting into the Horus Heresy. So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. But, I mean, other than the fact that he made the Space Marines, you do not see any redeeming qualities to this guy.
Well,
And the unification, anyways, of humanity. To me, anyways, that's a big one.
other than those two things, well, technically the Primarchs too, because the Primarchs and the Space Marines are together, but
Right.
not offhand. What about you?
No, I think that the Emperor is a little bit more complex. Now, mind you, it's funny. We were, when we're going through, anyways, our research on this box, we kind of talked about the concept that the Emperor is, and the sad joke of the Emperor is that he really is the biggest, baddest orc in the universe. He has set up this concept, anyways, of might equals right. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole lot of that, anyways, that does make sense. It's just he's a little bit more complex than that.
Well, and one of the things that we both agree pisses us off about that is the fact that the orcs don't have nearly as much records about them and their uniqueness, and yet here the Emperor gets boatloads of information.
Well, I mean, there's a reason for that, Yuksen. It's because the orcs don't write anything down. Humans do.
Yes, excuses.
That's a pretty good excuse, though. But the Emperor, here's the thing that I've never been able to understand. Maybe, Yuksen, you've got a better idea of this. Does the Emperor really care about humanity? Or is it just simply he's using humanity as a tool to get what he wants? And that's the thing, anyways, that I've been scratching my head over for years about. Because there are times, anyways, that it seems like he really is pushing for humanity to, spread out again across the solar system and push everything else out. But at the same time, there's always this weird, background noise of him doing other things, and he's trying to do something else, and what's helping him is this.
Yeah.
I think
he does. He isn't necessarily using humanity as a tool. I do think that his viewpoints on humanity is different than they probably should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's the question. Do you think that the Emperor wants humanity to succeed?
Yes.
Okay. Now, here's the second question. Why?
I would say part of it is because he wants to be on top of the food chain.
Like you mentioned before. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. And then the other part is, of course, if you're at the top of the food chain, you might as well have people with you. In this case, humanity.
You don't want to be that guy anyways. It's just like, I'm all alone.
Yeah.
There's no one here beside me. Yeah. But you gotta have friends. Stop singing.
Yeah. You got to have friends. Well, there aren't any.
Yes. You killed them all. Yeah. Okay, I hear you.
And the fact that he's like,
he's
definitely a piece of work. He's like, I will wipe out the Xenos, and then I will first, though, hack into their system so I can create a new system.
That's a different thought process, though, Yuksen.
It's inferior.
But I'm going to use their technology. Yeah, okay. I hear you on that part. But, I mean, the Emperor to me has always been kind of a catch-22. You've got this guy who really wants humanity to succeed. He really does. But at the same time, there's that question of why does he want humanity to succeed? Is it just simply because he's human? Well, no. So that's not really the reason why. I think he put it eloquently. He wants to be on the top of the food chain. He wants to be the savior of humanity. And anybody else, you can't do that.
Right.
I mean, if, like, for instance, let's take a name here, for instance. Like, for instance, Horus. If Horus said, you know what, I've got a better plan and it has nothing... If he'd done this differently anyways, it had nothing to do with chaos, but your imperial truth anyways is wrong. We've got a better way of doing this.
The emperor probably would have said, screw you.
Yeah, you would still have had the Horus heresy. Exactly. It would have just been like, no, I'm the savior. You are not.
You are my poorly little child. Get back in line.
Exactly. And the sad part about that is that, I mean, the emperor always referred to his primarchs as his sons. And the emperor looks at his sons as tools. And he has some favorites. It's just like if you go down and you're going to make some woodworking art or you're going to build furniture. Your favorite tool. All right, we're taking the Sawzall or one of these other tools anyways. The drill. That's my favorite tool. That's the way the emperor thought of his sons, which is so sad. I mean, you just described it anyways. Magnus the Red was supposed to sit on the golden throne.
Hence why they still tried to do it with Arvida.
Yes.
We're going to stick him with this shard of Psyche from Magnus and we'll stuff him in there.
Yeah. He wasn't looking at these people as people. He was looking at them as tools. I mean, Lehman Russ is known as the executioner. That's the job the emperor gave him. And he did a very good job of it. The problem is that towards the Horus heresy anyways, he was thinking when he was going, maybe I don't want to be the executioner. Well, too bad. The emperor decrees it. The emperor, to me anyways, is interesting because does want humanity to succeed, but only if he's in charge of it.
Yeah.
To me, it's that simple. I mean, you got anything else, Yuksen?
Well, I have a question for you.
Oh, really?
When did the emperor meet Phil the sandwich maker?
No, well, that's fairly interesting, actually. Thank you for bringing that up. Well, let's end this on a high note, shall we? Phil was a sandwich maker in the techno-barbarian state of Old Albia. You see, the emperor helped Old Albia against their most hated foe, the Pan-Pacific Empire. Yet when the emperor demanded they bend the knee to his rule, they refused. And so the emperor and his thunder warriors fought Albia, who fought back with their own proto-dreadnoughts and armored Ironside clan warriors. In battle after battle, the Albians managed to hold back the emperor's forces, but only at a staggering cost to the defenders. As a result, the techno-barbarian state presented a considerable challenge for the forces of the emperor during the Unification Wars. So much so that the emperor, impressed by the determined, brutal resistance of the state's defenders, decided to end the fighting and take Albia through negotiations. Admitting the martial temper and indomitable spirit of his foe, the emperor called for a ceasefire and sought a diplomatic solution. The emperor appeared before the Albion clan lords, unarmed and clothed in white and crimson, speaking of his vision for unified humanity. He offered the Albions glory among the stars as well as redemption. To the shock of many, the warlords of Albia, seeing the emperor as different from past tyrants, accepted his terms for unification. After all the papers were signed, the emperor, warlords of Albia, and the grand retinue of thunder warriors paraded down the main streets of London, the capital city of Albia. Flowers were tossed from the upper windows of the city streets, and all those who were on the street roared and cheered with approval, even as they bowed when the emperor strode forward. The emperor smiled and waved, yet sighed to himself the ridiculousness of it. He didn't need these people's admiration, just their obedience. Yet his patronizing smile dimmed as they were about to turn the corner to the next street. Above the bowed heads and the roar of the crowd, he noticed one singular person that didn't bow and cheer his name. He wasn't a lord, nor someone dressed in fine manner, but a simple sandwich maker. A little perturbed by this, the emperor stopped at the corner, stomping his way towards the sandwich maker's cart. With a stern look, he glared at the merchant, who to his surprise didn't quake in fear, yet held his gaze. "Now, sir, it is proper to bow and pay homage to your superiors," the emperor stated. Without fear, the sandwich maker smiled tightly and said,
I do. Yet, I don't see anyone in this fancy parade that can make a sandwich better than me. So therefore, no superiors.
With a scowl, the Emperor responded, I'll make you eat those words, you beggar. The sandwich man smiled and said,
Not before you had the best sandwich of your life.
with a chuckle, the man boomed out, which, much to the chagrin of the Emperor, dulled the crowd.
Tell you what, I'll make you a sandwich, and if it ain't the best sandwich you had ever, sure, I'll go ahead and give you a bow.
This was by far the strangest challenge the Emperor had ever had in his long years, and honestly, for the rest of his life. With a broad grin, the Emperor nodded his assent. This would be most interesting. Soon the sweet smell of burning meat and melted cheese filled the air. The aroma made the saliva run, even in the Emperor's mouth.
There you are.
The man said.
I give you an old recipe called the Philly cheese. Now it ain't a classic, mind you. I had me special size, along with some bales.
Taking the food from the man's hand, the Emperor scowled at his lack of decorum, yet took a healthy bite. The explosion of flavor rocked the Emperor, almost dropping him to his knees. With every chew, it simply got better. It was so good, in fact, the Emperor did not want to swallow the morsel in his mouth until he remembered he had the rest of the sandwich. The Emperor of mankind, the one known in later years as the God Emperor, devoured his food like a kid who discovered a sloppy Joe. He so enjoyed the meal, he did not realize until a few seconds later that the man who had made the sandwich was extending a napkin. That's when the Emperor of mankind realized he was surrounded by thousands of people with food on his face. He felt something he hadn't felt in nearly 20,000 years. Embarrassment. Quickly taking the napkin, the commander wiped his face quickly, his face now crimson. Anger rose up in the Emperor, but soon faded as the last whiffs of the smell and taste faded from his mouth and nose. A broad smile, the first of sheer joy the Emperor had let cross his face in 10,000 years, erupted in something unheard of. Laughter. The crowd didn't know what to make of it, until the great Emperor lowered himself and extended a hand, saying, Well met, sir. This is by far the greatest sandwich I've ever had. And that was how Phil became the sandwich maker of the Emperor. Well, folks, I believe we've run out of time this week.
So what are we doing next week, Zeckthar?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Join us next week as we cover the Great Crusade and some of the Primarchs found along the way.
Can't wait, brother. But if you enjoyed this Vox, feel free to subscribe, comment, follow, and like. And if you really like our stuff, please join our membership squad on our YouTube channel, Tales of Asharaka.
Indeed. Before we go, we got some exciting news about the shop. As you know, anyways, it's open. And Yuksen doesn't like bears. He likes rabbits. And so therefore, anyways, if you want to support this channel, buy a rabbit.
Righto! But, all power to you if you like your teddy bears over rabbits. Personally, I would rather have a hat. But go ahead and check out the shop. There's lots of stuff there. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't worry. I will make sure the link is in the description so you can check it out yourself.
Yes, and thanks for listening. And as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar
And Yuksen.
signing off.